the main features that to me seem the most interesting that I thought I would kind of focus on. Active job is probably the biggest. Global ID is really cool if you've ever done any kind of job in kind of delayed tasks. You have to kind of pass an ID, and it's kind of an involved affair. You have to set it up, pass a few details, and pass in the class. But now it's all one ID, which is really cool. Action Mailer takes advantage of that active job. Adequate Record gives you some speed bumps. Web Console and Debugger are kind of some new tools that I'll go over, and a new way to kind of set up a Rails app. That is really pretty cool. So Active Job is a new part of Rails that actually sets up a job queue for you inside of Rails, and it works with all the different common queuing systems. So basically what it is, it's kind of like Active Record will work with Postgres or MySQL. You just have to change some configuration settings. It's the same basic principle where if you want to change your work or your queue system, you can just hop in, change a few config files and you're good to go. So that's pretty impressive. It's available on GitHub. I'm actually going to go into a little bit about it. So to set it up, you basically, in your application file, you're going to specify what you want your queue adapter to be. And so that's just, if you want to use Redis, Sidekick, Delayed Job. I mean, I think there's 8 different ones that are supported. I'll post a link to all those, and they have API docs on how to integrate with each of them. But once you do set it up, you can basically declare it looks, very similar to similar job queuing systems. It has its own folder. You choose what queue you want to go into, and just do your job, do work, set it up. Queuing tasks. This was actually the part that the syntax changed. It originally was on queue instead of perform later, and they did some testing and realized that doesn't make any sense. Perform later is a little bit easier to understand, and so they're kind of changing it up. But it's really quite cool. You can choose to pass in a parameter where you can say I want to wait until this date in the future, or in a week, or however you want to do it, to perform later. And it has support for multiple queues as well. So if you have kind of a high priority task queue and maybe a lower priority task queue, you can actually separate them out if you've got a rather large application that becomes a factor for you. Global ID kind of goes hand in hand with that. It's a system for giving every model instance an ID that's unique. So in the past, you do like a find by ID. In fact, I'm going to show it. Well, here's the old way of passing it. So you have to pass in the class, the ID, and actually kind of constantize it. This is an area where I'm not that familiar with, I'm afraid. So if I'm saying stuff that doesn't make too much sense, I apologize. But now you just have to pass in that one ID. And so I'm actually going to show that on console real quick, so that we can have a look at that.
Sorry, has anyone here done background job processing?
Yeah.
Who has? I should ask. Yeah, like 3 half hands, so I'll take that as 2.
Okay, so everyone's on. Okay, cool. I was worried I was talking to some background job experts that were going to be like, oh, that kid's not making sense.
The active job is pretty cool for me. I've done a lot of it, and I've switched back-end queuing systems multiple times. So it'd be nice not to have to change all my code 100 times, just swap out the back-end. So it's a pretty good advancement.
What's it useful for? Just curious.
Jobs?
I currently have a system where for reimbursements, people buy things and they'll submit for reimbursement, and they have to attach a photo of their receipt, and then they get an email that gets sent out. And then our payroll processor runs a job where she gets all of those claims that have been put in. She needs to process those. And every time she processes one, an email gets sent out. So when you've got a whole bunch of emails that need to be sent out, when the requests come into your application, Your application normally has to wait until the email is done sending before it returns.
So this is basically
So by queuing
do
it,
this, and then go
by queuing it to a job or a process on the back end, your application will return immediately, and people can keep doing stuff.
Yeah, so like the most common use case in general is emails, and actually Rails baked in support for that now in 4.2 to just deliver later and just throw it off on the queue very easily.
Or if you're doing image processing, and people are uploading the image and you're cropping it and you're doing stuff, you can just hand that off to the back end processing.
I also use it pretty aggressively for doing a lot of heavy lifting data tasks. So for example, we have one app that does a lot of importing and manipulation things. So if I upload 1 million records into my app, I don't want to process those all at once. I'd rather split that out into 25 jobs and process, 4,000 of them at a time. Make the job a lot lighter and easier, right? So I can split out across threads on a nice server and have 20 workers go at once rather than do 20 times the work in one process. So we use it also for just mashing a lot heavy processes. Are another good example.
So the global ID, I'm going to actually kind of illustrate a little bit so that you kind of see what that means and how it functions. So if you think about a typical, I just set up kind of a demo app with some data. So typically in Rails, you're going to go to the model and you're going to find by an ID in order to select an object and do something with it. So in this case, I'm grabbing a post, and I think the other one was announcement. Awesome. And so if I were to just do announcement.id and post.id, they're equivalent because they were both the first object inside the stack. They both had an ID of 1. And so in order to, you can't just pass an ID when you've got a lot of different classes. That's not going to work. So you had to pass the class name as well in order to do that, and then sanitize it, do a few things to make it work. And so now what they've done that is a lot cooler is to global ID. So let's do that again. So this is baked in to any active model class, so pretty much everything you're going to use. And it passes in what the app is, the model name, the model ID, and a URL. And active job is pretty cool. If you just pass in the announcement object or whatever object you're doing the task on, it will automatically grab the ID, send it, do the job, and come back and update it without you having to actually use this ID at all or even know that it's happening. It just will do it automatically for you, which is a pretty big step up. I mean, I think it is, Ben, right? Isn't that a lot better?
Sure.
Yeah. But it basically, it makes active job makes background process a lot easier, and just, again, it's really nice if you decide to switch from one back end to the other to be able to do that.
So do you know how are those objects stored? I mean, is it stored in memory, or is it stored on the hard drive, or do you know? I haven't looked into that much yet.
I think it just gets
Stored
stored
in
in
memory.
memory, and then you have to still do a cleanup afterwards. So if we go back
Or
here,
does it store in a DB somewhere?
I'm not sure.
You didn't have to run any migrations for it, though, right?
The global ID is
That's
just built in. Yeah.
It looks like it bases, like from what I could tell from the ground, just look like it bases it on the class.
It's almost just kind of, it's basically, I don't know, to me I thought of it similar as a pointer, where it's just, here's where the object's located, here's all the information to get to it, in just a simple kind of hash, pass it through something really light. But yeah, you still have to clean up, but it kind of makes it a little bit easier to do it. Action Mailer has actually, it's the first Rails feature to actually take advantage of active job built in. So you now have deliver later or deliver now methods as opposed to the original deliver, which is now deprecated. So you can just say, I'm going to deliver later, and it'll automatically head off to your queue, or deliver now if you want to do it immediately. This brings real foreign key support to Rails 4.2 brings it in. In the past, I know when I'm teaching people, if we wanted to associate a couple models, it was okay, it's going to be in or belongs to or references all these different things. But now it's just as simple as add foreign key and the table and the table that you're referencing. And that will generate the author's ID, in this case, for articles. So you can add a foreign key that actually references another primary key, remove the foreign key on your migration. So kind of cleaning up that syntax and kind of modernizing it, because foreign keys is something Rails hasn't had for a while. It's kind of had it, but not really.
Now, is that actually reference a foreign key?
It does, yeah. Real foreign key support.
So does it, do you know, does it lock tables to have a single primary key, or does it, I mean, because before it would just set up the ID and then it didn't actually create the key on it, like if you're around a schema spider, look at it in the DB?
They didn't, in the documentation I found, I'd have to kind of check a little deeper. The stuff they put just on Rails guides about it did not specify, just said real, this is foreign key support. So I would assume that it functions just the same as proper foreign key does, instead of kind of the piecemeal way that we've had in the past. Adequate record is pretty cool. It's just a set of refactorings that makes some common database queries 2 times faster. And you don't actually have to do anything. It will just automatically go in and use that. The way that it works is that if you think of like a SQL find by, when you look at what active record is doing is taking your Rails, converting it to a SQL statement, going to the database and grabbing your object or whatever. With find, it's actually just going to cache kind of the first half of that SQL statement. And so because it's caching it, it can just kind of eliminate having to rewrite that SQL statement over and over again, having to recalculate it. It just caches the find to make some queries up to 2 times faster. There's actually a link that I'll post as well to the more technical explanation by Tenderlove, the guy who actually set that up. He's apparently always trying to add speed improvements because that's the one area that Rails lacks in a little bit. But yeah, so it'll work with post.find, post.find by title, or any sort of more specific find query. And it actually also works for some associations. And here's kind of the speed increase. Also, you can see up to 2 times faster, where the scale is calls per second. And this is a lot more explained in depth by Tenderlove, because that's pretty high level. I mean, working on the core Rails code. But it won't work with anything else, really. It's just those find bys. If a model uses single table inheritance, it's not going to work. If you pass in a list of IDs or your own SQL fragments, it won't work. So it's one of those things where it's very nice. It'll give you some speed improvements. You don't have to do everything, but it's not kind of a catch-all solution. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar with better errors. If anyone's not, it's basically a gem that makes it kind of really cleans up your error page, and it's a console that you can actually use right on the browser. And so Rails decided, hey, that's a great idea. Let's just copy it and take it in. So it's built into the default error page now. And you can also actually just pop it in to your code somewhere. So I'm going to go to my index page. This is just a very basic, let me embiggen that a little bit. Yeah. This is just a scaffolded app. But yeah, all you have to do is use ERB and set up, just say console. And when we go run that in the server, just pops a console down at the bottom of the screen. So you can just, right now I have let's see if I can make that a little bigger. So I wanted to inspect my posts, maybe do a few things with it.
And if you raise an error, does it show up there too?
Yes, it would show up on. In fact, I'll do that in a sec.
So if you put that console in like a different slot, like say for example, in or something, that happens. So does it just have its own CI?
I don't know. I haven't tried it. I think it just yeah. Let's just see what happens. That's the best way to learn, right? Oh yeah, there you go. So you can put it wherever you want in the loop and be able to kind of see what's going on. You should grab the first post, so only on the first run through the loop then. Yeah. Oh, what do you know? Yep. Very cool. Yeah, so you can actually put that wherever your code, and it'll actually have access to all the stuff that's been computed at that point or within a loop or whatever. I wonder if that also, I haven't checked to see if that kind of disables the page either. No, okay. But yeah, so that's pretty nice if you don't like, kind of the heaviness of adding, extra gems to development or whatever, or if you just aren't a fan of better errors. It's just baked right in now. So let's see if I throw an error. Oh, that won't do it, huh? Oh, that's even better. So looks very similar, but if an error pops up, if you want to throw console in for whatever reason, it's available. It's pretty awesome. Apparently, it's also accessible actually if you go to /console on your browser, but I haven't actually been able to get. Oh, okay, that might be it. No. I looked at the documentation. I haven't been able to figure out why that's not working. So that might be a feature that isn't quite working yet, but it is what it is. I think it's just useful to be able to put that wherever you want, especially now that we know that it's in the context of wherever you're at in the app, which is pretty cool. Additionally, you can actually do debugging now. So with it's just kind of a simpler way to set up debugging. So I'll do the same thing here. I'll just add debugger. It's my code. And when I refresh the page, you can see it's waiting on the page, and it'll actually open it up in the console for you. So that also, I mean, it's basically took parts of pry, parts of their errors, and kind of threw them all in there. So it's using the bybug gem. So let's see if we can't make that a little more legible. No, maybe not. Yeah, see, I can kill the server. I can break, it has breakpoints. I can do a backtrace. Lots of just great debugging functionality built right in with bybug. All right. So bin setup, everyone has had the experience where they've cloned a repository or started up a new project and you have to run RateDB setup. You might have to, there's just lots of little tasks you have to do in order to get set up. And so Rails decided, let's just pop that into its own file. So if you go to bin in a new Rails 4.2 application, there is this setup file, and you can just write Ruby scripts in it to run whatever you need to run. So in this case, it's just going to run RateDB setup, remove some old files, and restart the server. But you can do this however you want, and so it's totally customizable. And then the way that you run it is just bin setup. There you go. So that's pretty handy, especially if you start using that. If that catches on, becomes widespread. All you have to do when you download an app is bin setup and go.
I see your file again.
Sure. Yeah, it's pretty straightforward too. You just
Like
type in the command with system.
Plus.
Yeah.
So really, it's just giving you shell scripts within your app.
Just in a dedicated place, and kind of standardizing it. Convention over configuration goes away. All right, let's see. I'm getting close. There's a few other minor changes. Well, this HTML sanitizer change is actually pretty major for some people, I think. But they rewrote the whole HTML sanitizer. The kernel one is going to be around for a little bit. In production, they took the log level and set it to debug by default, which kind of would standardize all your different environments. It used to be that it was just on info. You can still override that in your config file, but it's just kind of nice when you're trying to debug a production app to not have to worry about that. And if you're in your browser and you try to do 0.0.0.0.3000, that's not going to work anymore. They changed up rack, and so now localhost is going to be the default, which is what I've always used anyway, and I think a lot of people do. Additionally, that created some issues, I think they were saying, with accessing remotely. So if that's something you need to do or that you worry about, that would be a good thing to go check out in the release notes. And some removals. There's quite a few more, but these ones were kind of the headliners that they thought people should be aware of. Respond with and class level respond tos have been moved to a separate gem. So you can include that gem and still use it. Instance level respond to is unaffected, however. I honestly haven't used that much. I know that in scaffolds it'll often do that if you want to respond with HTML or JSON. And then they've changed the kind of how render works as well. So if you just do render foo bar, it's going to do render file instead of render template. Oh, sorry. Previously it was render file, and now it's render template. So if you actually want to render the file specifically, you'll have to specify that. So yeah, full details on this are available on the Ruby on Rails. The Edge Guides has the release notes, and the weblog as well for Ruby on Rails has a bunch of information. There's actually a lot of really great. There's a video that shows kind of how to set up active job. There's a few other just kind of people who've done a few different walkthroughs or features. There's a new way to load config files. That's kind of cool. If you have like a YAML config, Redis config or whatever, it's very easy to load that in. But yeah, thanks guys. That's kind of a brief overview, but a lot of cool features in there. I think, especially, I love the fact that there's that debugger built in without having to worry about setting stuff up. Just a lot of things I think make it just a little bit nicer than Rails already is. So, yeah, with that, if there are any questions, I guess we can go back to that.
Nice.
All right.
Great job. So normally with these minor releases, there's normally not a ton of incompatibilities. So, normally when you like upgrade a major version, a lot of people will say wait a month or 2, or 3 or 6 or 12. But with minor ones, normally you can do it within a week or 2 pretty safely. Definitely within a month. Big thing to check is your gen compatibility. So look at Gymnasium or something like that to see if they're testing it. Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, that the in-browser console without raising an error is actually pretty cool because I can't tell you how many times I just run object inspects just to see everything I have on the page because I don't remember it. So that's pretty cool. Cool. Well, we have time for some lightning talks if anybody wants to do that. And have a show and tell.
Guess not.
Jeez. I'm going to show off
Does anybody know about POW?
Yeah. Do it.
Okay, so POW is a web server that's built by 37 Signals. And that's where David Heinemeier Hansen hails from. They make CAM and some other web apps. Basically, what it does is it replaces the need to run Rails server. And what you end up doing is, let's see. So, can everybody see this? Let me make it bigger.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. So here's my Rails application, and then well, actually, let me go to, here's the website where you can download it from, and it's pretty easy. They give you a command to paste into the command line to install it. Once it's installed, there's a .pow directory in your user folder. And then all you need to do is create symlinks to any folder that has a public directory, and it will serve up any of the files in the public directory statically, but it will also serve up your Rails application. And what that lets you do is, so instead of typing localhost or an IP address at port 3000, you can actually give it a domain name that you want to use. So for this one, and then it appends .dev at the end. And now you can run your application with a nice clean domain name in the browser. And somebody else was mentioning if you want to access this from other devices, they actually also have
Zip.io.
xip.io. So if I wanted to access my application instead of, this one I was showing you was pulse.electronics. Instead of .dev, I would just put in the IP address of this machine, which is here, and .xip.io. And for some reason it's broken for me right now. But normally you could, if you're developing and you want to check it on another device like a phone or an iPad or a tablet device, then you'd be able to access the server running on your local machine. Be able to do that. A lot of web servers, you'll have a single web server that's running, but it's serving on multiple websites. And when you have a web server running at a single IP address, but it's serving on multiple websites, it needs to figure out which one you want. And so it'll parse the name that you pass in, and that's how it'll figure out which website you want to serve on. So that's all I had. Great.
Yeah, mine's broken too in here. I zip out. I wonder if it's something with the local configure something.
I'm not sure if it's that, but it doesn't work in my office. It doesn't work in my house.
Oh, really?
Just
I've used mine in the last couple of days and it's not working here. So.
Yeah, I'll have like a phone and a tablet, or I'll tell someone else, hey, check this out. Here's a link to it.
Cool.
Yeah, I always have something that I might need to talk about. Give me 1 minute. All right.
No one's even on the hang on anymore.
That's fine.
So,
An adapter.
Negative.
what's that usually do? It's your computer.
All right.
Yeah.